Hi folks, you just learned how to do the universal intro rule. What we're going to do in this video is practice it with a more complex example. So if you don't know how the universal intro rule works, you need to go back and watch the previous video. If you saw that already and you understand the basic structure of the rule, then what I want you to do is try to prove this more complex sentence. This thing is a first order of validity. You can prove this from no premises at all. So pause your videos and see if you can complete this proof. Then we'll talk about the answer. Okay, that was your chance to pause your videos. Universal intro proofs, even though they seem odd when you first see them, this rule about arbitrary names is new, there's actually something quite wonderful about them. They're a lot like AIntro. Proving a universal conclusion always tells you to do the exact same thing. If you see a wide scope arrow in your conclusion, you know to assume the antecedent and try to get to the consequent. That's what you always do. Well, when you see a universal quantifier in your conclusion, you assume an arbitrary name and you try to get to the last line, which is just this big formula with the arbitrary name substituted into it. So since you always apply that exact same procedure every time you see one of these, it actually will become quite familiar and it will be a nice thing because there's no mystery about what to do next. Now, so what I just said is we start by assuming an arbitrary name. What we need to do is assume a name. And since this is the first arbitrary name in our proof, we need to write @n. And then, like I said, the last line of this subproof, it's absolutely essential that you sketch out the last line of this subproof with the name n substituted in for all of the x's. Because now you know the way that the universal intro rule works is if you can prove this about the object n, then you get to infer it for all objects x in your domain, which is what our final goal is. So now, once you sketch out the subproof, you've left the universal quantifier behind. All you need to do is focus on proving this last line of your subproof, and you're going to be done. Now, what do we do next? Well, if you didn't know how to start the proof, pause your videos now and see if you can finish it. If you already started the proof, then we will just keep going and see what to do next. Of course, what you do next is you assume 3 more things. And you might be wondering, hold on, wait a minute. How do I know we assume all of those things? Well, just remember, look at the structure of where you're going. You're trying to prove now this thing, which is a wide scope arrow. And wide scope arrows are wonderful. You just put the antecedent in a new assumption line and you try to get to the consequent. Now, we just, again, apply the same procedure. Let's look at our main connectives. The main connective of my new assumption is an arrow. That does not tell me what to do yet. So don't jump in and start assuming P of n. That would be jumping the gun. My conclusion is a wide scope arrow. Now that is great. I like wide scope arrow conclusions because again, I just start a new subproof. Now I have applied the same procedure. This is a wide scope arrow assumption line, so I don't do anything with it. Instead, I notice that my conclusion is a wide scope arrow. That tells me what to do. Finally, I get to assume P of n. Not because my arrow assumptions had it in the antecedent, but because my arrow conclusion had it in the antecedent. That's what told me to assume that. So all of these subproofs, look, I'm 4 deep in the subproofs, but if you've been following along what we've been talking about, this shouldn't throw you off. You know how to get out of these subproofs because I've carefully started each one with a plan in mind, with my arrow intro plan in mind, or my universal intro plan in mind. So when I finally get to this point, now I notice the bells have to go off. P of n. I've been waiting for P of n to show up because I have it in the antecedent of lines 2 and 3. So now I can just do some arrow elims, and you can do them in whatever order you want. It doesn't really matter. I just did arrow elim on 3 and 4 first to get Q of n, and then I did it on 2 and 4 to get my other consequent, Q arrow R. Finally, if I put those 2 things together, I get to R of n. So you can see, even though this is a proof in FOL, and we started out trying to know how to prove a universal quantifier, once you get the thing going, it's all the proof in propositional logic. So this is the sense in which all of the things you learned previously in the course are absolutely essential. They are the inner part of this proof, and it's all applying those rules that actually allow us to get from my arbitrary name n all the way to where I'm trying to go. Okay. Once I've got line 7, you know how we get out of these subproofs. These are just my arrow intros that I planned them out for. So I just cite that subproof. Once I finally get to line 10, which is this arrow, which is the main connective of my subproof, my final line of the subproof, that is the thing that's inside the scope of my universal quantifier. Once I finally prove that, I'm done, because I know that if I can get to that thing, that's what allows me to justify my universal intro proof. And all I do is cite that subproof, which is 1 through 10. So now you finished it. Congratulations.